In ancient times, many different species of cacti were domesticated in Mexico. These species were listed on the image seen here, during which time many studies went into trying to figure out how the cultivation of these cacti happened, and as such, 3 methods were identified. One is gathering fruit from wild populations, the other was a silvicultural management system, in which all but a few species and phenotypes of said species are removed, and the rest is cultivated for food purposes or other uses. The third method is home gardening, where individual plants of Columnar cacti were vegetatively or sexually propagated over a long period of time. These processes led to the domestication of these cacti. The differences between the wild and domesticated forms of cacti seem to be almost non-existent, with the only major difference being a higher speed and rate of germination in domesticated populations. For this reason, it's speculated that the domesticated populations have lost much of their drought-tolerant capabilities that they used to have due to being managed for such a long period of time and mass-propagated from singular desirable phenotypes. This paper by Susanna Gulian in the American Journal of Botany was designed to see if this is the case, and here's the results. In the species Sinoceras pruniferus, it was found that the wild populations could withstand greater sunlight exposure than the cultivated ones. The cultivated populations could survive greater levels of high humidity, as well as producing a greater number of viable seedlings in comparison to the wild populations. The wild populations could survive lower humidity than the cultivated form. Further research indicates that seedlings from domesticated populations are 392.9 times more likely to die when exposed to total sunlight and high humidity at the same time, in comparison to wild populations. In both low humidity and 80% shading, seedlings have a 152.74 times greater risk of dying than seedlings of wild populations. In Stenoceras stellatus, it was found that high humidity decreased the lifespan of these cacti across the board in both cultivated and domesticated populations. Same thing goes for complete exposure to sunlight, indicating that the biological limitations are conserved from both wild to domesticated populations. In the species Pelasgia chitpapi, there is no significant differences in survival rates under the different circumstances of high humidity, low humidity, heavy shade, and no shade. In yet another species, Escontria chiotila, no differences between wild and domesticated populations were found. During the study, other phenomena were also found. It was found that seeds in domesticated populations were generally larger and heavier than the seeds in wild populations. This may be because Columnar cactus species are often used for their fruit. This makes sense since, in cacti, the ones with the largest fruit also have the largest seeds and the largest number of seeds. So by selecting for the largest fruit in cacti specimens, you're indirectly selecting for the largest seeds. The higher rate of germination seems to correspond with larger embryo size, since in cacti, the seeds lack a endosperm, which typically feeds and nurtures the growing embryo until it's able to survive on its own. In the study of the absolute growth rate, there is a positive correlation between seed size and seedling size, with the bigger the seed, the bigger the seedling, with the exception of S. prunosus, which had the heaviest seeds but did not produce the tallest seedlings, or have the quickest growth rate. The relative growth rate did not differ between cultivated and wild forms of the species, but it did differ between different species used, such as S. stellatus and S. prunosus had the slowest growth rate amongst the species selected. In terms of seedling survival, it was concluded that humidity and the amount of solar radiation tend to be the biggest factors in seedling survival in cacti. In the wild forms, perennial shrubs and trees that shade the developing cacti seedlings significantly increase seedling survival in comparison with the open areas. P. chichipe and the Chiotilla seem to be more adapted to drier climates. As such, high humidity seems to have a greater effect on their health, while the Stenoceras species tend to be more resistant to high humidities, growing in more lakey areas. And in the cases of S. prunosus, cultivated seedlings seem to be more susceptible to high levels of solar radiation than the wild forms. For Stenularis stellatus, there seems to be no difference. This is likely due to the fact that there's a lot of phenotypic plasticity involved in this cactus, meaning that the species can alter its own biology to suit its environment to a very high degree. Well, that about covers everything. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching this video. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to me on BitChute for a greater variety of content, 4 videos a week. And thank you to all my subscribers on both platforms. I appreciate it.